The stars looked cold and distant through the small window of the prison transport. Jiwoo pressed her hand against the glass, watching her ship burn in the darkness of space. The diplomatic vessel that had carried her across 3 galaxies was now just debris floating among the stars. The Vrokian Empire had attacked without warning, without mercy, and without any interest in hearing what she had to say. 2 massive guards stood behind her. Their skin was covered in thick scales that shimmered like oil under the dim lights. They were at least 3 meters tall with long tails that scraped against the metal floor. Their eyes were yellow and cold, looking at her like she was nothing more than an insect. They had taken everything from her except her clothes and a small medical kit they had missed during the search. She kept quiet about the kit. Something told her she would need it. The transport ship shook as it entered the atmosphere of the Vrokian homeworld. Through the window, Jiwoo saw a planet covered in dark cities made of black stone and metal. Massive towers reached up into the red sky like claws. She had studied many alien civilizations during her years as Earth's ambassador, but the Vrokians were different. They did not want peace. They did not want to understand others. They wanted only power and control. The transport landed on a platform outside a huge fortress. The guards grabbed Jiwoo by her arms and dragged her out. Her feet barely touched the ground as they pulled her through massive doors carved with images of war and conquest. Inside the fortress was dark and cold. The walls were made of smooth black stone that seemed to absorb all light. Strange symbols glowed faintly, casting red shadows everywhere. They walked through long hallways filled with the sounds of suffering. Jiwoo heard screams coming from behind heavy doors. She saw other prisoners in cells, creatures from species she had never seen before. All of them looked broken and afraid. Her heart ached for them, but she kept her face calm. She could not show fear. Not now. The guards brought her to a massive chamber where dozens of Vrokian nobles sat on stone seats that rose up like stairs around a central platform. At the highest seat sat Commander Thalrix. He was larger than the other Vrokians, with scars covering his face and arms. Medals made from strange metals hung from his chest. His eyes fixed on Jiwoo with something between amusement and contempt. "So this is a human," Thalrix said, his voice deep and rough like grinding stones. "Your species sent this small, weak creature to negotiate with us?" How insulting, the other nobles laughed. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. Jiwoo stood straight and looked directly at Thalrix. "I am Ambassador Jiwoo of Earth. I came in peace to establish diplomatic relations between our worlds. Your attack on my ship violated every law of the Galactic Accords. The other civilizations will not." Thalrix raised his hand and Jiwoo felt something slam into her chest. She flew backwards and hit the floor hard. The wind knocked from her lungs. She tasted blood in her mouth. "The Galactic Accords?" Thalrix stood up, his massive form casting a shadow over her. "We do not follow the weak rules of inferior species. The Vrokian Empire takes what it wants. We conquer what we desire, and we destroy those who stand in our way." He walked down the steps toward her. Each footstep sounded like a drumbeat. "Your people demanded an audience with our High Council," he continued. "You wanted to be treated as equals. But you are not equals. You are nothing, and I will teach you humility in the old way." He gestured to the guards. They pulled Jiwoo to her feet. "Take her to the proving pit," Thalrix commanded. "Let the Karveth show her the price of human arrogance." The nobles cheered and shouted. Jiwoo felt ice in her veins, but she did not let it show on her face. She had heard stories about the proving pit during her research on the Vrokian Empire. It was where they sent those they wanted to make examples of. No one ever came out alive. The guards dragged her down into the depths of the fortress. The air grew hotter and smelled of smoke and old blood. They descended through tunnel after tunnel, going deeper and deeper into the planet's crust. Finally, they reached a massive circular door made of metal and stone. Ancient symbols covered its surface, warning of danger in a dozen dead languages. The door opened slowly, revealing a vast darkness beyond. Jiwoo could feel heat coming from inside like breath from a furnace. She could hear something moving in that darkness, something massive. "Enjoy your death, human," one of the guards said with a cruel laugh. They shoved her forward. Jiwoo stumbled into the darkness and heard the door slam shut behind her. The sound of heavy locks clicking into place echoed through the space. She was sealed in. For a moment she stood still, letting her eyes adjust to the dim light. The chamber was enormous, at least 100 meters across. The walls were covered in strange glowing fungi that gave off a faint blue-green light. Old bones lay scattered across the floor. Some from creatures she recognized, others from species she had never seen. The ceiling disappeared into darkness far above. Then she heard it. A deep, rumbling growl that seemed to come from the earth itself. The sound made her bones vibrate. She turned slowly and saw 2 points of burning amber light emerge from the shadows at the far end of the chamber. Eyes. Massive eyes that fixed on her with the focus of a predator. The creature moved forward, and Jiwoo's breath caught in her throat. It was at least 30 meters long from nose to tail. Its body was covered in scales that looked like they were made of dark metal. Each scale was as large as her hand. Massive claws scraped against the stone floor, leaving deep grooves. Spikes ran down its spine, and its tail ended in a club of bone and horn. Its head was shaped like a wedge with rows of teeth that glinted in the dim light. This was the Karveth, the dragon beast that the Vrokians kept as their ultimate executioner. Above, Jiwoo could hear voices. She looked up and saw observation platforms high on the walls, where Vrokian nobles were gathering. They wanted to watch. They wanted to see her die. The Karveth opened its mouth and roared. The sound was so loud that dust fell from the ceiling and the fungi on the walls flickered. Jiwoo felt the sound in her chest like a physical blow. The creature's breath smelled of sulfur and death. Every instinct told her to run, to scream, to beg for mercy. But Jiwoo had not become Earth's greatest xenobiologist by giving in to fear. She had spent 15 years studying how different species thought, how they communicated, how intelligence emerged across the universe in forms both familiar and strange. She stood her ground and watched the dragon approach. Her mind was already working, analyzing, looking for patterns. The way it moved. The way it held its head. The scars covering its body. The chains embedded in the stone floor that had once held it but were now broken. This was not just a monster. This was something more. The Karveth stopped 10 meters away, studying her with those burning eyes. It tilted its head slightly, confused perhaps by prey that did not flee. Jiwoo took a slow breath and made a decision. She would not die here, not like this, and if she could help it, neither would this magnificent creature. She took a step forward. The Karveth watched as the small human stepped closer, its massive head lowered, bringing those enormous jaws within striking distance. One bite and the soft creature would be gone. That was how it always went. They threw prey into the pit. The prey ran or screamed or begged, and then it was over. But this one was not running. Jiwoo kept her movements slow and steady. She had learned long ago that sudden moves triggered attack responses in predators. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. But she forced her breathing to stay calm and even. She remembered her training with Earth's great reptiles, the crocodiles and Komodo dragons she had studied before humans reached the stars. She began to make sounds, low and rhythmic. Not words, but tones that carried meaning through their pattern and pitch. It was a technique she had developed after years of research into how different species processed communication. Language was not universal, but rhythm and tone seemed to touch something deeper, something that existed in all intelligent beings. The dragon's pupils dilated slightly. Its head tilted more, and the rumbling in its chest changed pitch. Not quite a growl anymore, something closer to curiosity. Jiwoo kept up the sounds as she studied the creature more carefully. Now that she was closer, she could see things she had missed before. The scars were not just random marks from battles. They were systematic, placed with purpose. Burns across the snout, deep cuts along the flanks, old wounds that had healed poorly, leaving thick scar tissue that probably caused constant pain. Torture marks. Her chest tightened with anger and grief. This creature had been hurt deliberately over and over again. The Vrokians had not just captured it. They had broken it, turned it into a weapon of fear through pain and cruelty. Above them, she heard Thalrix's voice boom through speakers built into the walls. What is the human doing? Why does it not run? Perhaps it is frozen with fear, Commander, another voice answered. No, Thalrix said slowly. It is doing something. Watch closely. Jiwoo ignored them. She was focused entirely on the Karveth now. She noticed how its eyes tracked her movements with precision, how it adjusted its stance as she moved, maintaining perfect balance. This was not the behavior of a mindless beast. This was intelligence. She had seen this before in Earth's dolphins and elephants and the great apes. Creatures with complex social structures, with memory, with the capacity for grief and rage and joy. The Karveth had that same quality in its eyes. It was aware. It was thinking. Jiwoo slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out her medical kit. The dragon tensed, its claws scraping against stone. She held the kit where it could see clearly, then opened it with slow, deliberate movements. Inside were basic supplies: bandages, antiseptic gel, healing paste, and a small scanner. She took out the scanner and held it up. The device was designed to read biological signatures and identify injuries. She pointed it at the dragon and activated it. A soft hum filled the air and a gentle blue light washed over the Karveth's body. The dragon did not attack. It watched. The scanner's display filled with information that made Jiwoo's stomach turn. Dozens of old fractures that had healed incorrectly. Infected wounds deep in the muscle tissue. Embedded foreign objects, pieces of weapons that had broken off and been left inside. Malnutrition, dehydration, and something else. Something the scanner flagged as neural damage. They had hurt its brain. Probably with electric shocks or similar torture, trying to make it more aggressive, more violent. "I am so sorry," Jiwoo whispered, her voice breaking. The Karveth's eyes narrowed. It made a sound softer than before, almost questioning. Jiwoo put the scanner away and took out the healing paste. It was designed for humans, but the basic formula worked on most carbon-based life forms. She squeezed some onto her fingers, then very slowly reached toward a deep gash on the dragon's front leg, one that looked fresh and infected. The Karveth pulled back, a warning growl building in its throat. "I know," Jiwoo said softly, keeping that rhythmic tone in her voice. "I know it hurts. I know you do not trust, but I want to help. Please let me help." She reached out again, moving even slower. The dragon could kill her in an instant. One sweep of those claws, one snap of those jaws, and she would be gone. But something in her refused to accept that. Violence was the only way this could end. Her fingers touched the edge of the wound. The Karveth went completely still. Jiwoo began applying the paste gently around the infected area. The dragon's breathing was loud and harsh, but it did not pull away. She worked carefully, treating the wound with all the skill she had learned. The paste would help fight infection and speed healing. It would not fix everything, but it would help. When she finished with that wound, she moved to another, then another. The dragon allowed it, though tension radiated through its massive body. With each wound she treated, she spoke softly, maintaining that rhythmic pattern of sounds. Above, the Vrokian nobles had gone quiet. They watched in stunned silence as the human moved around their greatest weapon, touching it, healing it, completely vulnerable and yet unharmed. "This is impossible," someone muttered. Thalaric said nothing. His claws gripped the edge of his seat, watching. After what felt like hours, Jiwoo stepped back. She had treated every wound she could reach. The healing paste was almost gone, but it had been worth it. The dragon's breathing had changed. It was calmer now, deeper. Some of the tension had left its body. Jiwoo sat down on the stone floor, exhausted. Her legs were shaking from adrenaline and fear she had been suppressing. The dragon watched her sit, then did something unexpected. It lay down. The massive creature lowered its body to the ground, resting its head on its front legs. Those burning amber eyes never left Jiwoo, but there was something different in them now. The rage had dimmed, replaced by something that looked almost like confusion. Jiwoo smiled sadly. "You have been alone for a long time, have you not?" The dragon huffed, a sound that might have been agreement. "So have I, in my own way," Jiwoo continued. She knew it probably could not understand her words, but the tone mattered. "I travel between the stars, meeting new species, trying to build bridges. But I am always the stranger, always the outsider, always alone, even in crowds." The Karveth made a low rumbling sound that resonated through the chamber. "They hurt you," Jiwoo said, anger creeping into her voice. "They tortured you and used you and turned you into something you were never meant to be. But I can see what you really are. You are not a monster. You are magnificent." The dragon's eyes closed for a moment, the first time since she had entered the pit. When they opened again, something had changed. There was recognition there, understanding. Jiwoo stood up slowly. She walked closer to the dragon's head, close enough to touch. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, but she kept going. She reached out and placed her hand on the dragon's snout, right between its eyes. The scales were warm and surprisingly smooth. She could feel the heartbeat beneath, strong and steady. "My name is Jiwoo," she said clearly. "I come from a planet called Earth. My people are new to the stars, but we try to do better than this. We try to see the value in all life, in all intelligence. We make mistakes, but we try. The dragon's eyes focused on her face. It was listening, really listening. I do not know if you can understand me, Jiwoo continued, but I promise you this. I will not let them keep hurting you. I will find a way to free you, or I will die trying. You have my word. The Karaveth exhaled, a long breath that washed over Jiwoo with heat and the smell of sulfur. Then slowly, deliberately, it closed its eyes and leaned into her touch. Trust. Against all odds, in this pit of death and darkness, a connection had been made. Above, Thalric stood up abruptly. Enough of this. Activate the pain fields. Make the beast attack. Commander, if we do that while the human is touching it, I do not care. Activate them now. But before anyone could move, the Karaveth opened its eyes again. This time they were not looking at Jiwoo. They were looking up at the observation platforms where the Vrokians stood, and in those eyes burned something that had been missing before. Purpose. Far above the Vrokian homeworld, a human ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The vessel was smaller than the massive Vrokian warships that patrolled the system, but it moved with purpose and precision. Its name was painted on the hull in both English and Korean, Seoul's Pride. On the bridge, Captain Hyun-ki stood with his arms crossed, staring at the tactical display. Red dots marked Vrokian military positions throughout the system. His ship was outnumbered and outgunned, but he did not care. One of his people was down there, and he was not leaving without her. Status report, he said calmly. Lieutenant Bora looked up from her station. We have located the fortress where they are holding Ambassador Jiwoo. It is heavily defended. Ground-based weapons, energy shields, and at least 20 warships in orbit. Can we get a signal through to her? Negative, sir. They are jamming all frequencies. But I did pick up something interesting. Bora brought up a new display. There was a brief energy surge from deep inside the fortress about an hour ago. The pattern matches a bioscan activation. Hyun-ki's jaw tightened. He knew Jiwoo well. They had served together during the crisis on Titan Colony, where she had prevented a war by establishing communication with a species everyone else had written off as mindless. She never gave up on finding peaceful solutions, even in the darkest situations. She is doing something down there, he said. We need to buy her time. What assets do we have? Another officer, Minsu, spoke up from the weapons station. Captain, we have enough firepower to make a dent in their defenses, but we cannot win a straight fight. If we attack, we will be destroyed. Then we do not fight straight, Hyun-ki said with a slight smile. We fight smart. Prepare the drone swarm and load the message pods. It is time to let the galaxy know what the Vrokians are really doing here. In the depths of the fortress, Jiwoo was making a discovery that changed everything. The Karaveth had moved to the far wall of the chamber, to a section hidden in deep shadows. With careful gestures, it showed Jiwoo what it wanted her to see. She followed, her hand still resting on its scales to maintain the connection they had built. The dragon stopped at the wall and used one claw to scrape away centuries of accumulated grime and fungal growth. Beneath, something appeared. Markings. No, not just markings. Art Jiwoo's breath caught as more of the wall was revealed. It was covered in carved images and symbols. She recognized the style immediately from her studies of ancient civilizations. These were not random scratches. This was writing, storytelling, history preserved in stone. The images showed a civilization of dragon-like beings living in great cities. They were not monsters or beasts. They were people. The carvings showed them building, creating, teaching their young. There were images of art and science, of families gathered together, of festivals and celebrations. You were not always alone, Jiwoo whispered in awe. The Karaveth made a sound deep in its chest, mournful and ancient. Jiwoo traced the carvings with her fingers, following the story they told. The images shifted, showing darker times, ships arriving from the stars, battles, cities burning, the dragon people fighting desperately against invaders who wanted only destruction, the Vrokians. The story continued, showing how the dragon people were hunted down, one by one. Their cities were destroyed, their culture erased. The carvings showed fewer and fewer dragons until finally there was only one. The Karaveth Jiwoo turned to look at the dragon with new understanding. They killed your entire species. They committed genocide, and they kept you alive as a trophy, as a tool to terrorize others. The dragon's eyes burned with pain that had lasted for centuries. What was your name? Jiwoo asked softly. Before they made you into the Karveth, what did your people call you? The dragon made a complex sound, something between a growl and a song. Jiwoo listened carefully, then tried to repeat it. Her human vocal cords could not quite match the tones, but she came close enough. Solve, she said, adapting it to sounds she could make. I will call you Solve. It means strong house in an old Earth language. Is that acceptable? Solveig's eyes seemed to shine brighter for a moment. The dragon nodded its massive head. Jiwoo felt tears running down her face. She did not try to stop them. I am so sorry for what was done to you and your people, Solve. No one should have to endure this. No one should be alone for so long. She pressed her forehead against Solveig's scales. The dragon rumbled softly, and Jiwoo realized it was the closest thing to a purr she had ever heard from a reptilian species. Above them, Thalrix watched with growing fury. His plan had been simple. Throw the arrogant human into the pit, let the Karveth kill her, and send a message to Earth that the Vrokian Empire would not tolerate their interference. But nothing was going according to plan. Activate the pain fields, he commanded again. Commander, please reconsider. If we, now, the technician's claws moved over the controls reluctantly. Throughout the chamber, hidden devices began to glow. They had been installed long ago to control the Karveth, to punish it when it did not perform as expected. Solveig's entire body went rigid. A roar of agony tore from its throat as electricity coursed through the chamber. The dragon collapsed, convulsing. No, Jiwoo screamed. She tried to reach Solveig, but was thrown back by the electrical field. She hit the wall hard, pain exploding through her body. Through the agony, she saw Solveig thrashing. The dragon's claws tore at the stone floor. Its tail smashed into walls. The pain was driving it mad, just as it had been designed to do. Stop it, Jiwoo shouted at the observation platforms. You are monsters, stop! Thalrix's voice echoed through the chamber. Now you see the truth, human. The Karveth is ours to control. It will always be ours. And soon, your people will learn the same lesson. In 1 hour, we will flood this chamber with plasma fire. You and the beast will burn together. I hope your death teaches your species humility. The pain fields deactivated. Solveig lay gasping on the floor, tremors running through its body. Jiwoo crawled toward the dragon, her own body aching from the electrical shock. I am here, she said, reaching out to touch Solveig's face. I am still here. Solveig's eye focused on her, filled with such grief and rage that it took Jiwoo's breath away. Listen to me, Jiwoo said urgently. I know you are hurt. I know you have been hurt for so long that pain is all you remember. But I need you to remember something else. Remember who you were before they broke you. Remember your people, your civilization. Remember that you are Solveig, last of the Draken. The dragon's breathing began to slow. They think they have won, Jiwoo continued. They think we are both going to die here, helpless and afraid. But they are wrong. Because they made a mistake. They put us together thinking you would kill me. Instead, they gave me a friend. And you know what humans do for their friends, Solveig? The dragon's eyes fixed on her face. We fight, Jiwoo said fiercely. We fight with everything we have. We do not give up and we do not surrender. And most importantly, we remember. My people have a saying. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. The Vrokians think they can erase history, can destroy cultures and pretend it never happened. But they are wrong. She stood up, her legs shaking but her voice strong. Your people's story is carved into these walls. Their art, their culture, their existence, it is all still here. And I will make sure the galaxy knows. The Vrokians committed genocide and they will answer for it. I swear this to you. Solveig slowly pushed itself back to its feet. The dragon was still trembling, still in pain, but something had changed. The despair in its eyes had been replaced by determination. Jiwoo smiled. They gave us 1 hour before they try to kill us. That is enough time. I have friends coming, Solveig. My people do not abandon their own. And you are one of us now. Can you help me with something? Solveig lowered its head in a clear gesture of agreement. Good, Jiwoo said, her mind already racing through possibilities. Because I have a plan and it starts with getting out of this pit. Can you still breathe fire? In response, Solveig opened its mouth and released a small jet of plasma. The flames were precise and controlled, nothing like the wild, unfocused attacks the Vrokians had forced from the dragon. Perfect, Jiwoo said. Now I need you to aim at that wall, the one we came in through. I noticed the metal in the door is different from the stone around it. If you can heat it enough, the structural integrity will fail. Solveig turned toward the massive door. The dragon's chest began to glow from within. Above, alarms started blaring. The Vrokian technicians stared at their displays in shock. "Commander! The Karveth is preparing to attack the containment door." Thalrix leaned forward. "Let it try. That door is held for 300 years. It will not." Solveig unleashed a torrent of plasma fire that turned the air white-hot. The stream of flame struck the door with the force of a starship engine. The metal door began to glow red, then orange, then white. Solveig maintained the plasma stream, pouring centuries of rage into focused fire. The ancient stone around the door started to crack from the intense heat. Jiwoo had to back away, shielding her face from the inferno. Above, panic spread through the observation platforms. Vrokian nobles scrambled for the exits while technicians frantically worked their controls. "Reinforce the door." Thalrix roared. "Send security forces. Do not let them escape." But he was too late. The door's structural supports failed with a sound like thunder. The massive barrier exploded outward in a shower of molten metal and shattered stone. Solveig stopped breathing fire and roared in triumph, the sound echoing through the entire fortress. "Let's go," Jiwoo shouted, climbing onto Solveig's back. The dragon's scales were hot from the exertion, but she managed to hold on, gripping the spikes along its spine. Solveig charged through the destroyed doorway into the tunnels beyond. The corridors were built for Vrokian soldiers, not for a 30-meter dragon moving at full speed. Solveig smashed through walls and supports, creating a new path through the fortress. Behind them, the observation chamber collapsed as its supports failed. Guards appeared ahead, carrying energy weapons. They fired, bolts of plasma striking Solveig's armored hide. The dragon barely slowed. With one sweep of its massive tail, Solveig sent the guards flying into the walls. "This way," Jiwoo called, using her mental map of the fortress layout. During her brief time in the transport, she had memorized every corridor and chamber they passed. It was a skill she had learned early. Always know where you are, even in enemy territory. Solveig turned down a larger tunnel. This one sloped upward, leading toward the fortress's main levels. As they climbed, Jiwoo heard something that made her heart race with hope. Screams and alarms, yes, but also other sounds. The roar of voices of many different species all crying out at once. They burst into a massive underground chamber, and Jiwoo's eyes went wide. Rows and rows of cells stretched in every direction, carved into the rock walls. And in those cells were prisoners. Hundreds, maybe thousands of beings from species across the galaxy. Some she recognized from her diplomatic work. Others were completely unknown to her, but all of them had one thing in common: they were slaves. The Vrokian Empire had built its power not just through military might, but through the systematic enslavement of conquered peoples. This was their secret, hidden deep beneath the fortress where the galaxy's other civilizations could not see. "We free them all," Jiwoo said to Solveig. "Every single one." Solveig roared in agreement and began tearing the cell doors from their frames. The prisoners emerged cautiously at first, afraid this might be another trick or test. But when they saw Jiwoo, saw a being who was clearly not Vrokian helping them, hope began to kindle in their eyes. "Listen to me," Jiwoo shouted in Galactic Common, the trade language most species understood. "I am Ambassador Jiwoo of Earth. This is Solveig of the Draken. We are escaping this place and you can come with us. But we need to move now." A tall being with 4 arms and silver skin stepped forward. "The Vrokians will kill us all for this rebellion." "The Vrokians have kept you in chains," Jiwoo countered. "They destroyed Solveig's entire civilization and tried to erase the evidence. They attack diplomatic vessels and torture anyone who stands against them. The galaxy needs to know what they really are. Help us spread the truth and we can end their reign of terror." The 4-armed being looked at the others, then nodded. "We are with you, Ambassador." More prisoners emerged, a tide of different species united by their suffering and their desire for freedom. Among them were warriors from conquered worlds, scientists who had been forced to work for the Vrokians, even children taken from their families. Jiwoo's jaw clenched. "The Vrokians would pay for this." "Solveig, can you access the fortress computer systems?" she asked. "I need to find the armory and the communications center." Solveig moved to a wall panel and studied it for a moment. Then the dragon's claw pressed against several points in a specific sequence. The panel lit up, displaying a map of the fortress. "You can read their language," Jiwoo said, amazed. Solveig made a rumbling sound that might have been bitter laughter. 300 years of captivity had taught the dragon many things, including how to understand the language of its captors. Jiwoo studied the map and pointed. There. The communication center is 2 levels up. If we can access it, I can send a signal to my ship. She turned to the freed prisoners. Those of you who can fight, we need to get to the armory first. Those who cannot, stay in the center of the group. Protect the young ones. They organized quickly, moving with the efficiency of people who had nothing left to lose. Solvay led the way with Jiwoo on the dragon's back, directing their path. The freed prisoners followed, growing in number as they smashed open more cells. Vrokian security forces tried to stop them. They set up barricades and fired weapons, but Solvay's plasma breath turned their defenses to slag. The freed prisoners fought with desperate courage, using anything they could find as weapons. In one corridor, they encountered a Vrokian officer who had been particularly cruel to the prisoners. He tried to activate a device that would lock down the entire section. A former slave, a being covered in thick fur, reached him first. The Vrokian's screams were brief. Jiwoo did not interfere. Justice sometimes wore a harsh face. They reached the armory and broke through the reinforced doors. Inside were weapons of every type: energy rifles, plasma blades, explosive devices, and suits of armor. The prisoners armed themselves, transforming from helpless victims into a fighting force. Above ground, Captain Hyun-ki was executing his own plan. Seoul's Pride had launched hundreds of small drones, too many for the Vrokian defenses to track and destroy. Each drone carried a message pod that would broadcast throughout the system and beyond. Message pods deployed, Captain, Bora reported, broadcasting on all frequencies. The pods began transmitting images of the slave chambers below, records that Seoul's Pride had intercepted showing Vrokian war crimes across dozens of systems. And most damning of all, evidence of the Draken genocide pieced together from ancient records the Vrokians thought they had destroyed. On worlds across the galaxy, the broadcasts were received. Species that had thought themselves alone in suffering against the Vrokians suddenly realized they were part of a larger pattern, and more importantly, they realized they were not alone. In the fortress, Jiwoo's group reached the communications center. She accessed the systems, her fingers flying over the controls. The encryption was complex, but she had been trained by Bora herself in electronic warfare. "Come on," she muttered. "Just a little more." The system unlocked. Immediately, she opened a channel to Seoul's Pride. "Seoul's Pride, this is Ambassador Jiwoo. Do you copy?" Static, then Hyun-ki's voice came through clear and strong. "Jiwoo, we have been trying to reach you." "Are you safe?" "Safe is relative, Captain. I am in the fortress with several thousand freed slaves and a very angry dragon. We need extraction, but more importantly, I need you to broadcast something. We are already broadcasting evidence of Vrokian crimes. The entire galaxy is watching." "Good. Add this." Jiwoo activated the fortress's own recording systems, showing the carvings on the walls of Solvay's prison. "This is proof of genocide. The Draken were a peaceful, advanced civilization. The Vrokians murdered them all and kept the last survivor as a weapon. This violates every treaty and law in galactic space." Solvay stood beside her, allowing the cameras to capture the dragon's image alongside the historical carvings. The visual was powerful. The last survivor of a murdered people standing in the prison where it had been tortured for centuries. "Broadcasting now," Hyun-ki confirmed. "Jiwoo, we are picking up multiple signatures. Fleet formations jumping into the system. It looks like everyone is coming." Jiwoo allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy had remained silent about Vrokian aggression for too long, afraid to act, afraid to stand together. But fear only worked when victims remained isolated. Unity was the answer. "Captain, we are going to bring down this fortress from the inside. Be ready for survivors, understood? We will be waiting." "And Jiwoo? I knew you would find a way." The transmission ended. Jiwoo turned to the assembled freed prisoners. They numbered in the thousands now, a multi-species army united by purpose. "The galaxy is watching," she told them. "Ships are coming. Help is on the way. But we need to send one final message to the Vrokians and everyone else who thinks power comes from cruelty and fear." She climbed back onto Solvay's back. The dragon's eyes burned with purpose. "We need to reach the High Council chamber," Jiwoo said. "It is time to have that diplomatic conversation Thalrix denied me. Who wants to join us?" The roar that answered her shook the walls. The fortress shook as Solvay crashed through the ceiling of the High Council chamber. Stone and metal rained down as the dragon landed in the center of the room, wings spread wide. Ji-woo sat on the dragon's back unarmed but unafraid, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. The Vrokian High Council had been in emergency session, trying to contain the crisis erupting across their empire. Thalric stood among them, his face twisted in rage. Around the chamber, dozens of guards raised their weapons. "Hold your fire," a voice commanded. The Supreme Chancellor, an ancient Vrokian covered in scars from 1,000 battles, raised one clawed hand. His name was Vortex, and he had ruled the Empire for over 2 centuries. "Let the human speak. I would hear what she has to say." Ji-woo slid down from Solvay's back and walked forward, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Behind her, the freed prisoners poured into the chamber surrounding it. They did not attack, but their presence was a clear message. The time of the Vrokians' unopposed rule was over. "Supreme Chancellor Vortex," Ji-woo said, her voice carrying through the chamber. "I came to your world seeking peace and dialogue between our peoples. I was thrown into a pit to die, but I did not die. Instead, I found something you tried to erase from history. I found the truth." She gestured to Solvay. "This is Solvay, last of the Draken, a people your empire murdered in an act of genocide. You kept Solvay alive not out of mercy but as a trophy, a tool of terror. You carved out the dragon's soul and filled it with pain, thinking you could control what you had broken." Vortex's expression did not change, but his eyes flickered to Solvay. "The Draken were not the only ones," Ji-woo continued. "Beneath this fortress you have kept thousands of slaves from dozens of species. You have violated every principle of the Galactic Accords. You have built your empire on suffering and tried to hide it behind walls of fear." "Careful, human," Thalric snarled. "You stand in our stronghold surrounded by our forces. You may have freed some slaves and tamed a beast, but you cannot win. Surrender now and perhaps we will grant you a quick death." Ji-woo laughed, a sound without humor. "You still do not understand, do you? This was never about winning a battle. It was about exposing the truth. Right now, my people are broadcasting everything across the galaxy. Every species in galactic space can see the evidence of your crimes. They can see the slave chambers. They can see the records of genocide. They can see Solvay standing here, living proof of what you have done." She stepped closer to Vortex, "and they can see ships jumping into this system. Dozens of them, species you have oppressed for generations, finally finding the courage to stand together. Your empire is already falling, Supreme Chancellor. The only question is how many more will die before you accept it." Vortex studied her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. "You are correct, Ambassador Ji-woo. The Vrokian Empire has committed terrible acts. We told ourselves it was necessary, that our strength brought order to chaos, but we were wrong." Thalric spun toward him. "Supreme Chancellor, you cannot—" "Silence." Vortex's voice cracked like a whip. "I am old, Thalric. I have lived long enough to see the patterns of history. Empires built on cruelty always fall. We should have learned this long ago." He turned back to Ji-woo. "What would you have us do, human?" "First, release all prisoners immediately and provide them safe passage home," Ji-woo said. "Second, open your records to galactic inspection. Every crime, every victim, everything. The galaxy deserves to know the full truth. Third, surrender yourself and your High Council to stand trial for genocide and crimes against sentient beings." "And if we refuse?" Thalric demanded. Ji-woo gestured to the ceiling where the sound of engines could now be heard. "Then the Allied fleet outside will reduce this fortress to rubble and you will die here. But more will die with you. Innocent Vrokians who were simply born into your empire. Is that what you want?" Vortex closed his eyes. "No, enough blood has been spilled." He removed the medallion of office from around his neck and placed it on the council table. "I surrender my authority. The Vrokian High Council will submit to galactic justice." Several council members rose to follow his lead. Others, including Thalric, snarled in defiance. "Traitors!" Thalric raised his weapon toward Vortex. Solvay moved faster than Ji-woo would have thought possible. The dragon's tail swept across the chamber, knocking the weapon from Thalric's hand. Before the commander could react, Solvay's massive head lowered until its burning eyes were level with his face. "Wait," Ji-woo said softly. "Solvay, he is not worth it." The dragon rumbled deep in its chest. Thalric fell to his knees, finally understanding what true power looked like. It was not about fear or cruelty. It was about choice. Solvay could kill him with ease, had every reason to want revenge, but chose mercy instead. "Take him into custody," Vortex ordered his guards. all those who resist the surrender as well. The crisis ended not with a battle but with acceptance. The Vrokian Empire, which had stood for 500 years through force and terror, fell in a single day because the truth could no longer be hidden. Over the following weeks, the galaxy transformed. The freed prisoners returned to their homeworlds, carrying stories of the human ambassador and the dragon who had saved them. Species that had been enemies found common ground in their shared suffering under Vrokian rule. Jiwoo stood before the Galactic Assembly, representing Earth in humanity's first official recognition by the greater galactic community. Beside her sat Solveig, granted full status as the representative of the Draken people, even though the dragon was the last of that species. "We accept Earth into the Galactic Assembly," the Assembly speaker declared. "Let it be known that humanity has proven itself worthy through courage, compassion, and commitment to justice." After the ceremony, Jiwoo found a quiet moment in the gardens outside the assembly building. She was exhausted, her body still aching from the battles in the fortress, but she felt more at peace than she had in years. Solveig found her there, the dragon moving silently despite its massive size. "Hello, friend," Jiwoo said, resting her hand on Solveig's snout. "How are you feeling?" Solveig made a complex sound, one that Jiwoo had learned meant something like content or at peace. "I have been thinking," Jiwoo continued. "The Assembly wants me to continue as ambassador, building relationships with other species. But I was hoping you might want to join me. The galaxy should know the Draken, should understand what was lost. You could teach them." Solveig's eyes seemed to brighten. The dragon lowered its head, and Jiwoo pressed her forehead against its scales in the gesture of trust they had developed. "We make a good team," she said. "A human and a dragon, showing the galaxy what cooperation looks like instead of conquest." A familiar voice interrupted them. "Ambassador Jiwoo?" She turned to see Captain Hyunki approaching with Lieutenant Bora and Officer Minsu. They were all in formal uniform, medals gleaming on their chests. "Captain," Jiwoo smiled. "I thought you would be back on Seoul's Pride by now." "We wanted to see you before we departed," Hyunki said. "Earth Command has new orders for us, but we wanted to say thank you. What you did on that fortress, the lives you saved, the change you brought to the galaxy, it is remarkable. I could not have done it without Solveig," Jiwoo said, "and without knowing you were up there ready to help." Bora stepped forward. "The broadcasts we sent have changed everything, Ambassador. Species across the galaxy are reaching out to Earth. They want to know more about humans, about how we approach diplomacy and conflict. We are not just joining the galactic community. We are helping to reshape it." "That is what I hoped," Jiwoo said. "For too long, the galaxy operated on fear and power. It is time to try something different. Empathy. Understanding. Recognizing that intelligence and consciousness have value regardless of what form they take." Minsu looked at Solveig with awe. "Is it true the dragon can understand multiple languages now?" Solveig made a sound that was unmistakably affirmative. The dragon had been working with linguists from a dozen species, relearning how to communicate after centuries of isolation. "Solveig has already taught us more about pre-Vrokian history than we thought possible," Jiwoo explained. "The Draken kept extensive records carved in stone across their worlds. Solveig is helping us locate and translate them. An entire civilization is being brought back from extinction, at least in memory and knowledge." "What will happen to the Vrokians?" Hyunki asked. "They are standing trial," Jiwoo said. "It will take years to fully address all the crimes. But Vortax is cooperating. He has provided evidence of everything, holding nothing back. Some Vrokians, especially the younger generation, are trying to build a different future for their species. One based on making amends rather than continuing conquest. And Thalrix?" Jiwoo's expression hardened. "He refused to cooperate. He showed no remorse. The tribunal sentenced him to life imprisonment. He will spend his remaining years in a cell alone thinking about all the suffering he caused." It was a fitting punishment, she thought. The same isolation he had inflicted on Solveig, though without the physical torture. Justice did not require cruelty. Months passed. Jiwoo and Solveig traveled the galaxy together, visiting worlds and meeting new species.